crazy. Sturgeon bites off more than she can chew, obsessed with EU to pushing Scottish independence. Nicola Sturgeon has been told her party will never achieve Scottish independence if it continues to obsess over the European Union. The new year is likely to bring about renewed calls for Scotland to hold a second independence push, with the previous vote approaching its 8th anniversary. According to some critics, the SNP is held back most by its political agenda beyond that of supporting independence. The SNP may still, after a difficult 2 years, hold a firm position in both Holyrood, the Scottish Parliament, and in Westminster. But Tom Harris, wiring in the Telegraph, argues that the party is unlikely to achieve its dream of tearing Scotland from the rest of the UK. This is due in part to the party's obsession with the EU, which it would like Scotland rejoin if it left the UK. He wrote, "The main reason independence has not yet made the breakthrough expected by Remainers and Rejoiners across the land is one that few of them would be willing to acknowledge. Scots in general, even those who regret our departure from the EU, regard the 300-year-old social, political and economic union as more important and more precious than a 50-year-old trade deal." Mr. Harris is a former Labour MP. He also led the Scottish Brexit campaign. Prime Minister Boris Johnson ruled out a second Scottish independence referendum in November. He called the 2014 vote a once-in-a-generation event. Mr. Johnson said, "I don't think people in this country think referendums are very wonderful for harmony. We had one in 2014, the British people, the people of Scotland, were told in 2014 that that was a once-in-a-generation event." Asked if he would grant another vote, he said, "No, I don't want to have one." Ms. Sturgeon criticised the decision to block a second referendum as unsustainable. Despite being told Scotland will not be given the option to leave the UK, the SNP leader has continued over the past year to push for independence. Even at COP26, when world leaders came together to put climate action above political action, Ms. Sturgeon was accused of pushing the case for Scotland to move ahead by itself. While the SNP may not be able to push Scotland towards independence in the coming years, Mr. Harris argued that it is likely to keep its hold of the country. He wrote, "There is absolutely no prospect of her party's grip on Scottish politics being loosened any time soon. The biggest threat to her comes from her own party members, who are not prepared to wait for a whole generation before achieving their dream of separation from the UK." The timing of the IMF bailout is also worth noting. The money came through when Europe was well into the pandemic. In Scotland, furlough, various business support and other assistance schemes were in place by then. The many billions of pounds needed to fund Scotland's bailout came automatically, when needed, thanks to Scotland's place within the UK monetary and fiscal union. If Scotland had left the UK after the 2014 vote, this money would not have been available. Instead, like Montenegro, Scotland would have been struggling to issue large amounts of sovereign debt denominated in a foreign currency, and it would have been paying a hefty premium relative to the remaining UK to do so. And Scotland, like Montenegro, would not have benefited from quantitative easing. Even a cursory examination of an independent Scotland's COVID plight should be enough to humble Nicola Sturgeon and her colleagues. A probable scenario would have been a country fighting day to day to raise enough capital to keep its public sector afloat while making payments on debt already outstanding. Then comes the first COVID wave and the newish state finds it has reached its limits on debt issuance, and so lines up alongside other dollarized and euroized countries to submit its application to participate in the IMF's Rapid Financing Instrument Emergency Assistance Programme. But how many lives would have been lost in the interim, as the Scottish Government waited for that bailout? How many businesses lost, how many households would have slipped into poverty? And then of course there would be the inevitable post-pandemic austerity imposed as part of the bailout agreements. This puts Sturgeon's performances at press conferences into perspective. When she presses her foot on the grievance pedal and tries to give the impression Scotland's financing needs are constrained by being in the UK, it is worth keeping in mind that the country's place in the Union has liberated it from the financial constraints the likes of Montenegro are subject to. To argue for a system that would inflict dollarization-type constraints on Scotland is baffling.